Ariel here to shake the matrix, expand our minds, and make us all think. How you guys doing this fine, grand morning? Whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening when you're watching this, it don't matter, because you know how I believe time is a construct we created. Nothing more than an illusion. You're just right in time right now. That's all there is to it. So, it's been a good weekend. If that's the construct you want to go by. But yes, time has been good. Now, let's get started. Let's do the one thing we do to get ready. Let's first of all,
power off.
Let's set that off. And let's take a deep breath, why don't we? And hold it. Let it go. Take another breath. And hold it. Let it go. Let your shoulders relax. Put your hands on your heart. Take another breath. And hold. Feel that heartbeat. Let it go. And say this. Body, mind, soul, being, the fallen mindset, the Diablos, the matrix system, the shadow matrix. Deactivate. Completely turn off. And we always speak to the divine. The original blueprint of our designs. Creator mode, we say fully activate. Fully on. I am that I am. And feel your heart. And take a deep breath with me. Hold it. And let go. Take another breath. Good morning. Welcome. So, I want to talk about, how we were programmed. What happened in the first place? See, most of the world you see around you was not built to help you remember who you are. It was built to distract you. It was built to keep you in a role, in a lane, in a pattern. Even from the moment you were born. I mean, the infinite, the open, luminous awareness that you began to be squeezed into a character. You got programmed into a name, a role in a family, a label at school even, a story about what you can and cannot do. Little by little, the divine spark, is covered in layers of shit, crap, lies. And this is just, now the divine spark, this is how life is, all of a sudden you believe, right? And this is just how we are. But that's not true. And that's what we're talking about this morning. This is about peeling back the layers of that. It's about seeing the blueprint that was installed in you and remembering that original blueprint beneath it all. And that's what it's about. and beginning to walk as the one who is not just in reality, but participating in shaping it as well. You know, morning. Thanks, man. You know, there are three main movements in this journey. And is seeing the blueprint and how it was programmed, awakening the observer in divine spark, and walking in being and restructuring your existence from the inside out. See, the blueprint is how we were programmed. You know, they used to think of building, think of a building basically. And before the bricks were put down, before the paint, before the furniture, there's this invisible kind of plane and this plan that's there and the blueprint. And you don't see the blueprint, but it's there. And when you walk through the house, you just live inside what it produced, right? What that blueprint was. Your life is the same way. Your reactions, your fears, your this is just who I am. They are like that blueprint, that house. But you don't see the blueprint anymore. And beneath that house is the blueprint, right? And this blueprint began forming early. You know, every repeated message from parents, teachers even, culture, religion, and media was like a line drawn on a inner plan. And if, as a child, you heard, stop crying, you're too sensitive, you learned my emotions are a problem right there. And if you heard, like, because I said so, you learned my inner knowing is not to be trusted. Authority is always right. And if you heard, you're so smart, you're responsible. You're the responsible one all of a sudden. You learned, I must perform and carry everything. I am loved for what I do, not for who I am. And especially for those raised in Gen X, my generation. How many of you been raised in that generation? Oh my goodness, some of the things we learned. The programming came, with its own flavor. If you were growing up in our generation. The latchkey life, we called it. Okay? We were given a key at a young age, all of us. We were given a TV, a microwave, and the instructions, don't die. and the blueprint, figure it out all alone. That was what we had to do. And and when we learned in that was needing others was weakness. Needing help was weakness. I mean, we emotional pain met with walk it off, You're fine. Or silence, the blueprint, my inner world is not important. I must minimize myself. It's a mixed message, like be yourself, and yet don't embarrass the family at the same time. So they tell you, be yourself, and then don't. It's yes, that's my Yoda on my shirt. What side are you? Oh, I don't do politics, man. Morning. All right. But they're sending you mixed messages, right? Be yourself and don't at the same time, please. So look like yourself, but but act like us, please. I mean, the blueprint, my authenticity is dangerous, basically, is what they're saying, right? And so we got taught these things and we squished ourselves down. Too much truth equals rejection. We laugh about it now and we make memes and jokes about it, but these messages did something profound. They began to write rules you still live by. By adulthood, the blueprint has had years to solidify into identity. We say, I'm just not the kind of person who speaks up. We try to get everyone else to. Thanks, man. You know, I always pick the wrong people, we say. I'm one of these, so he says that. I'm broken. That's why my life looks like this. You know, but the truth is this. You are not just that kind of person. You are carrying a blueprint that was drawn for you. And it was drawn for you before you even knew you had a choice. And this is the first awakening. You see that the life you were living is not pure destiny. It is largely the result of an internal plan designed by others' pain, fear, and culture and expectations. But that means it can be changed. See, psychology gives language to what happened here. Is our mind creates beliefs based on repeated experiences, and those beliefs become filters through which we see every situation, right? We'll see, man. If the blueprint says I'm not enough, then compliments kind of bounce off, right? You know, neutral situations are interpreted as proof of your insufficiency. And if the blueprint says the world is unsafe, then rest feels irresponsible, right? Joy feels dangerous. Trust feels like a trap. Neuroscience explains that the brain is constantly changing, constantly wiring itself based on repetition. You know, repetition, thoughts and emotions are not just invincible. They leave actual tracks. And every time you think, I'm not safe, or I'm not worthy, or I must please to survive, well, your brain strengthens in pathways, that make those thoughts easier and easier to think. I mean, imagine a forest with many possible trails. And at first, the paths are light, barely visible, right? But every time someone walks or a deer walks the path or the same route, the ground becomes packed. And the plants bend aside. And that path becomes easier all of a sudden. You know? And eventually, the only path you see. And you call it my personality, but it's not. It's really just my most rehearsed trail. It's been what's grooved into that brain of yours. So when you feel stuck, when you feel like nothing ever changes for me, it's not because you are cursed. It's because you are walking on the same inner path that was carved years ago, and often in childhood under circumstances you did not choose. And this is incredibly important. Your patterns are, are understandable, and they were intelligent responses to your environment. They were how you, as a small being with a sensitive nervous system, learned to stay safe, loved, or at least to minimize harm. But what helped you survive then may be choking your life now. And when you see your blueprint this way, compassion rises. You shift from what's wrong with me to, this is where my brain and body were wired into particular ways. This is how my system learned to protect me. And compassion is the doorway. It opens you to change because you are no longer shaming yourself for the pattern. You're observing it. And the observer in quantum reality is now something subtle begins to happen. The moment you can look at your pattern and say, I see you, a new position opens up inside. And this is the position of observer. You are no longer completely fused with every thought and feeling. You begin to experience a sight distance, even if it's small. You know, I notice that when someone doesn't reply to my message, my body panics, maybe. You notice that. Or maybe your mind tells you they hate me, or maybe that's your old patterns and this is you, but you notice and a pattern being noticed. And this shifts everything. Once we notice the patterns and we see it, that's the observing moment. And we go, okay, wait, there it is. It may seem simple, but spiritual and philosophical, and it is revolutionary. And it means you are not your fears or what you've been programmed to be. You are the one who sees the fear. You are not your shame. You are the one who can hold the shame with gentleness. You are not your story. You are the awareness capable of witnessing the entire story. And in quantum physics, at a tiny scale, experiments suggest that the act of observation itself affects what is observed. And the observer is not separate from the phenomenon being measured. There is a relationship between the act of looking and what shows up. See, you are in creation and creation is in you. You are in God and God is in you. Whether or not people go deep into science, the metaphor is powerful, is when the observer in you changes, your reality begins to respond differently. When your inner position moves from I am broke to I am witnessing a pattern of brokenness that was laid over my wholeness. And then you are less likely to choose relationship that confirms the old story. You are more likely to pause before reacting and choose a new path. And you begin to sense options where before there were only walls. See, reality in your lived experiences becomes less like a rigid prison and more like something that had space in it and possibility in it. And the outside world may not change overnight, but your way of meeting it does. And that changes everything. It does. It's a moment you can sit and be in even the most intense storms. And ancient and gnostic teachings spoke of a deeper reality behind the world of appearances. They describe a supreme, ineffable source, the monad, some call God, from which emanated a pure spiritual essence. Within human beings, they said, there is a divine spark, a fragment of the higher power, the higher reality, and often trapped or asleep in a lower distorted world. And this lower realm, shaped by ignorance and false rulers, is full of illusions, false identities, false authorities, false values. Sounds familiar? I mean, modern life mirrors this. We are taught to worship, productivity and appearance is important, and status and belonging and our titles and our degrees and at any cost. And we are encouraged to forget our inner knowing. And we outsource truth to systems, trends, and experts just to fit in. We lie, we gossip just to try and get some attention. And the divine spark is then covered by all this shit. Over roles and masks and bullshit. From agnostic's lens, the blueprint you inherited is largely shaped by the false world. And it tells you you are only as valuable as your output. And you must conform to be safe, and you are separate from the source of life, and that's just a bunch of bullshit. See, you are a fundamental lacking and must be fixed as from the outside, is what they say. But deeper than the installed blueprint is the original blueprint. And here's the original blueprint. The unique pattern of your being as an expression of the divine. And that's your original blueprint. The original blueprint is not damaged. It's just covered by crap. Your original design, it may be forgotten, it may be buried, but it is not broken. It is not something to go out and find. It is something to remember and discover. See, your deepest nature is not trauma you endured or the lies you believed or spoke. Your deepest nature is that shining point of I am that I am. That has been present through every experience, through every unchanged. Notice this in your own life, is that you have been many versions of you. Child, teenager, young adult, the one listening to these words right now even. I mean, your body has changed, your beliefs have changed. Even from when you were a child to now, your circumstances have changed. Yet there's something continuous, a sense of meanness, an underlying witness that has observed all of it. That witnessing presence is closer to the divine spark. To remember this spark is to begin to live from a different reference of point of, instead of asking, what does my programming expect of me? You begin to ask, what is true to my being? Instead of what keeps everyone else comfortable, you ask, what is aligned with my original design? You know, walking through the dark to reach the light. However, there is a temptation on the spiritual path to skip the pain and leap straight into light, to say, I am divine, I am light, I am love, and try to plaster the overall, over everything unresolved beneath. This is where shadow work enters. Shadow is not evil. It is simply the parts of your experience that have been pushed out of sight because they were too painful, too shameful, or too dangerous to feel at that time. See, your fear of abandonment, your jealousy, your rage, your numbness, these are not proof that you are bad. They are proof that certain needs were never met. Certain truths were never welcomed. And the shadow is what you could not safely be, And if you try to awaken the divine spark, while refusing to look at the shadow, you end up spiritual bypass, and you talk about light but secretly feel unworthy. You preach freedom but are bound by unacknowledged fear. You chase high vibes to avoid feeling grief and anger. Is to truly remember the original design, you guys. The original blueprint of our design. We got to walk through the places where the installed blueprint was burned in. And this means allowing yourself to see how your caregivers' wounds become your rulers and rules. Feelings, the grief for the childhood you didn't get. Admitting the way you are still acting from old pain today. And it may look like this, as you notice that in every relationship, you abandon your own needs to keep the peace. And instead of just trying to positive think your way into confidence, you sit with that pattern, and you feel the terror that rises when you imagine saying no. And remember the times as a child when saying no meant punishment, rejection, or coldness. As you witness with compassion, something softens. The body releases old tensions. The heart acknowledges old wounds. And in that honest space, a quiet realization can arise. It was never true that my needs made me unlovable. It was never true that expressing myself made me bad. I took on their pain as my identity, but it was never who I truly was. And this is shadow work. Not wallowing, not blaming forever, but letting the buried pain come into the light of awareness so it can move, integrate, and no longer control you from the dark. And as the shadow is met, the grip of the installed blueprint loosens. The nervous system has new room to breathe, and the observer becomes steadier. And through the gaps in the old structure, the original blueprint begins to shine through. The original blueprint, remembering your design, the original blueprint is the architecture of your soul. It is the way to the divine spark, longs expressed through you uniquely. This design is not a rigid life plan with exact details. It is more like a fundamental orientation. And some are wired to create beauty and art as their offering. And some of you are wired to hold space and heal. And some of you are wired to challenge systems and speak uncomfortable truths. And some are wired to build, organize, and bring order. Beyond these functions, these are deeper qualities: truthfulness, compassion, courage, curiosity, joy, presence. And when you strip away fear in programming, when you imagine acting without old threats of rejecting or shame, certain qualities in you feel natural, effortless. That is the flavor of your original blueprint. You know, the world you grew up in did not always welcome that original design. And maybe your sensitivity was called weakness. Maybe your creativity was called unrealistic. And maybe your power was called defiance. So you built a survival version of yourself. You bent, shrank, hid, or overperformed to fit into a blueprint handed to you. Now as you observe your pattern and walk through your shadow, you can begin to let the survival relax. You can start asking different questions. You know what's funny, dude? Is you tell me that I need to experience birthing a child, yet I have. So you're making a judgment and an assumption. So then that makes me question whether or not you have had one or not, if you've experienced that or not. Because usually if we're questioning something in another, it's actually within us. So what choices would I make if I were not obeying fear? What do I feel drawn to create, say, or become when I listen to my deepest truth? Where in my life does my soul feel cramped? And where does it feel expansive? The answer may not arrive in one moment. This is a process of unfolding, like slowly brushing dirt off an ancient carving, revealing the design underneath. But each honest look, each act of compassion towards yourself, each brave choice that aligns with your inner knowing uncovers another line of that original blueprint. Walking and being restructuring your existence. And at a certain point, this is no longer just about insight. It becomes about embodiment, walking different in the world. To walk in being means you do not deny your history, but you are no longer defined by it. You are aware of your programming, but you no longer let it run the show unchecked. You feel the divine spark as living presence, not just as an idea. You walk in it. I am that I am. And from this place, you may start saying no where you previously said yes out of fear. Now you're going to say no more often, probably. You may step toward a calling that your old blueprint would have labeled impossible. But now you realize it's possible. You may end patterns of self-betrayal and choose relationships that honor your soul instead of repeating your wounds. Life does not become a smooth, never-ending bliss. There are still challenges, losses, and unknowns. But the way you move through them is different. Instead of collapsing, instead of, into the old story you remember, I am the observer. I can see my fear and still choose alignment. I am the divine spark. My worth is not trial here. I am living in a responsible reality. And when I shift my inner position, new possibilities appear. Synchronicities may begin to increase. And the right people, the right people begin to come around, and ideas and opportunities seem to arrive just as open to them. And doors you thought were walls reveal themselves as thin, and you find yourself walking through. Now, and this is not magic in the childish sense. It is the natural outcome of a being who is aware of their blueprint, rooted in their original design, aligned in thought, feelings, and actions with that deeper truth. And this awakening is not a one-time event. It is a way of living, a way of being, again and again. And you will notice old patterns rising and remembering they are programming, not essence. Feel emotions they carry without collapsing into them. Recenter in the observer, in the divine spark, in your original blueprint. And choose the next aligned action, however small. Some days you may feel deeply connected to your being. Other days you may feel lost in your old stories. And you just realize, hey, going back to old stories there. There's a little bit of a old pattern shaking you got going on there, And what matters is not perfection, but persistence. Paying attention. The willingness to keep looking honestly and seeing it. The course to keep feeling. The humility to keep learning and know you got more to go on. The faith that beneath all of it is the divine spark, and it remains untouched. And you know that. And you were never broken. And you were programmed, wounded, and covered in layers of not you, but the core, I am, has been here all along. And as you awaken the observer, you tend to the shadow and return to your original blueprint. And you do more than change your own life. You become a living reminder to others that they too are more than their programming. And you become a walking invitation to remember to awaken and to walk in being. That's the truth. Well, thank you. I'm glad that you like my content. Thanks, man. All right, well, peace and love.